I'm sure it's quite clear that if you believe in your thought, if you believe that a thought that is coming into your mind, if you believe that thought to be true, then I guess everybody is aware that then you believe in the separate self. You believe that there is a separate one here that needs to be defended or needs to be maintained. And I assume that if you're on this channel, you already know that. But did you also know, or have you also thought about that there's an equal amount of identification with non-duality, with no self? There's an equally big identification, an equally big attachment to awakening and to where you are on your path. That is the same. So if you identify as a separate self, as a me, my, I, my gender, and all of that, you identify as that, you know that there's a first feta issue that you need to work with, the identification with thought. You need to work with that. Very, very clear. But a lot of people that I speak with, they are further along on the path. They do not work with the first feta. They might be working with craving and aversion, the fourth and the fifth feta, because that is where I now have seen through the separate self. So I do not need to go back to that. But that, my friend, is identification. You put a label on a state and call it permanent. You put a label on and say, I am here. I have realized this. I do not need to go back and listen to that. And in that, you are identifying as if you have not seen through the self, the separate self. It's a bit like that. To know and not to do is the same as not to know. And that is the point. If you at any point believe that you are further along, you're not. If you at any point believe that you have seen through something and it has absolutely fallen and there's no need to go back and look at that, it's arrogance. There is nothing permanent. You might have had, and it's a bit like what we experience with the honeymoon period, that we have an insight and it shapes and colors our entire perspective. But the way that the brain and the nervous system works, that is not gonna last. You know, we push that update button in our lives all the time, which means that hopefully you're updating yourself all the time, which means that this now has never been working with the separate self, with the identification with thought, with the identification with an I. And I really think that it's a huge mistake in our community that we do not put more emphasis on the importance of circling back all the time, questioning everything all the time, that every time you have an idea and you believe this to be true, you have to be curious. You have to be curious to what is it in that belief that seems true. How do you know? How do you know? You cannot be sure of anything. You cannot rest anywhere. The moment you rest in a belief or you rest in an experience, you're creating something out of nothing. You're creating a foundation that is not there. And in that creation, you're back in the first fetter, in the identification with thought. Because that creation is nothing but thought. Whatever underlying belief you have, whatever you're resting on, whatever you're leaning on, cannot be anything but a thought. So if you have the idea that I am further along, I would like for you to question that. How do you know? That is always, that statement, I'm further along, is always held up in a comparison with something else, which means you just made it dualistic. You just made it dualistic. You just made something out of nothing where you're resting on. And that is an indication to you that there are still things that need your attention. There are still things that you need to be curious about and to look into. And what you do is that in the moment when you catch yourself having a solid belief about something, believing this is true, I would like for you to make contact with your body. And this is another thing, a huge fault in our community as well, that we don't make enough contact with our body, because our body is like the only, how can you say, tool that can get us back into the present moment, because it's with your body that you notice your seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. Everything else is thought. And even those seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching have a little bubble in itself, a little, um, I can't call it reality, but a little like um, world inside itself. So you have like, when you can smell something, for example, if I say like freshly baked bread, just saying that, or hot chocolate, or fresh strawberries, or something like that, just me saying that, some of you can smell it. Some of you will start to produce saliva because I'm just saying that. And that is a thought about it. It's clearly not the freshly baked bread, the chocolate, or the strawberries that did that. You just did that with your mind. But every time we do that, we're not aware that I just did that with my mind. That is me believing in a thought because my entire physiology is reacting as if that thought is true. And the same is happening if you think about your uncle or your boss or Janice, or you know, you will have a physiological reaction to it as if it is true, you know? And it's not, though. It's just your opinion. It's your judgment about a person or situation. But your entire physiology is reacting as if it is true. And that is when I would like for you to make contact with your body. And I really would like for you to separate the physiological experience you have of it. It can be a contraction somewhere. It can be a clenched fist or clenched jaw or something like that. I really would like for you to make contact with your body and question, what connection is there between the clenched fist and the thought? Because there's none. There's not a single connection. You just made that up. It's not there. You cannot find it anywhere. Thoughts do not have any density. Thoughts are not real in any way. They are just occurring and going away again. But you just created a connection as if it's real. And in that, there is more for you to do in the identification of thought. We have just created a course. This is not a stitch for the course. I just want to say that we have just created a course that is dissolving that identification with thought. It's only $49. You can buy it on our homepage. This is not a stitch for the course. I just want to say that there is a course out there that can help you to see through all this. It's a very extensive course. It's at least 4 months to do it, at least. Um, but if you do the exercises in it, you will become aware that every single thought you have that you believe is true, it's just a thought. There is nothing real in it. Even though you feel that there's an I here, that too, that contraction too, can be questioned and can be dissolved. Um, and I think it's something that I'm going to focus the next videos about, and the next many shorts about, talking about that misconception that we have, that we can be anywhere but in identifying with thought, because everything you perceive as reality is thought. Yeah, thank you. We have created a course of our first Feta material. This course will walk you step by step through all of the ways in which identification is created and selfing happens. If you've been struggling to see through the self-structure or have that first awakening shift, this course contains hundreds of tools to help you discover the selfing mechanisms when they're happening. and then see through the illusion of identification that I created. Along with over 14 hours of videos, this $49 course contains a full book worth of summaries, extrapolations on the videos, written inquiry suggestions, and other text. So work slowly, leave time for integration. This is powerful material and it can be life-changing.